Hey Rem, I just wanted to go over my thoughts on your model and texturing, and hopefully this will be helpful to multiple people on the channel. Usually the way I do this is recording a video since I feel like that's the easiest way of doing it, since I can break down my thoughts in real time. So it's sometimes a little rambly, so I apologize for that ahead of time, but let's get into it. So the first thing I've seen is looking at things is typically for game assets, we tend to exaggerate the smoothness of edges a bit. So on the real model, the edges of the housing here are pretty sharp, and you've exaggerated them a little bit. I would do it a little more, just push a little more. Uh, there's a few reasons for that. One of the biggest ones is at the distance. A lot of times you see things in a game, uh, you will get aliased looking edges if the edges look too sharp, but if you round them off in the normal map, it solves that issue. Another thing I saw is it looks like even some of your edges are sharper than they are in the real one. So yeah, I would definitely lean towards beveling and softening. It seems like you're also missing, or not, maybe not missing, but not exaggerating even as much as the real one here. So like where this where this comes up out of the case here, we get this nice beveled edge that yours isn't just quite as much. Same thing with these here. It looks like yours might be a separate piece. I would try to get that modeled in. That's what I would look for on a real game asset. And I would also, even if it's just in your high poly, model a cutout here where your button goes in, because otherwise it just looks like this button is laying on top of this piece. And so like you want it to visually look like there's a cutout for this button to fit through. So that would just be in like your normal and AO bake. Uh, it could be. You could stick that in your low poly, but I mean, this is such a tight fit. You could probably get away with it just being a bake, although you can see a gap here at the top. So I know that that isn't really texturing stuff, but those are the big things that pop out to me at first. That's what other people will be looking at. I'm also seeing a little bit of inconsistency in the model where I see like a taper from the front of the button or this knob here. I guess it's a button, back to the housing, where yours looks like it goes straight in. Uh, some other things like these also look like they taper in a bit, where they're larger on the outside and then taper in. It could just be optical, but I would just double check that. Um, these screw holes don't look like they're as thick as these and not as rounded. Um, yeah, so I realize that's not really a part of the texturing where you ask for, but if I was looking at someone's portfolio for review to hire or something like that, I would definitely, those are things I would definitely see and bring up. So yeah, just big notes, exaggerate the rounding a little more, minimally match the smoothing and rounding that you see in your reference. So when it comes to texturing, I know there was some talk about um, how to get the soft look on these like rubber buttons. So looking at it, I think it's just a matter of dialing in your. So part of it again is coming back to rounding. So like having more rounded shapes are going to make it look softer. Like your arrows are very sharp as opposed to these, the edges are rounder, the corners are rounder. But a lot of it is the your roughness values. It's a little rougher than this harder plastic. If you really wanted to push that and you're using a ray traced renderer, you could use like a little bit of subsurface scattering. Uh, Almost every material except for like metal gets a bit of subsurface scattering. And normally you don't have to do that, but if you really wanted to experiment with that, you could. That's not something typically you see in like actual games, except for things like skin or things that have a lot of subsurface scattering. But it's something you could play with if you want. Uh, so when it comes to your texturing details, it really depends on what you are going for. So it kind of looks like you're going for a brand new piece, like fresh off the factory, having a little dust, which is something you can do. Um, Usually, I would suggest going for something that's a little more worn and tells a little bit more of a story, just because that shows more of a your technical skill. Uh, if you were going for jobs that were like marketing jobs that weren't like in the games sphere, I would say go for completely looking clean and brand new stuff. You see that a lot in marketing shots. Even marketing photography is touched up afterward to get rid of dust and stuff. But since I'm assuming you're gonna go, you want to do game stuff. Maybe that's a wrong assumption, but that's what I'll say. I would say really push the wear and tear. Think about this optic that's been used out in the field for, a year or two. So you want to add a lot of layers. Usually in my stack of uh, grunge and stuff, I'll add a layer of dirt, a layer of sand, a layer of dust. Um, so you get multiple different kinds of roughness response, color response. The dust, I've made my own dust alpha, but you can go and find your own that just has like little hairs and flecks, which you can see in this, which it looks like you've done a little bit. Well, I'm not really sure what these spots are. They don't really say much other, like they look too procedural. Like I don't know if they're supposed to be dust or wear, because if it's wear, it should be like more highlighted on the edges and not in the crevices. It doesn't really look like dust. Because I don't see like little hairs, which like if you zoom in on a lot of dust, a lot of it is little flecks and hairs. So I would just check out that. Um, so yeah, dirt, like maybe mud, sand, dust for additives. Then you want to do things like scratches. Different materials scratch differently. So your metals and your plastics should have a bit of a different thing. I've gone personally, like I will take real physical things like tools and stuff I have and actually physically scratch them to see like, okay, this type of plastic, when you scratch it, it gets lighter. This metal, how does the roughness change? Does it get more rough? Does it get less rough? Things to take note of there. And when you're holding something physically and you can like move it and see how it responds to the light, it's a lot better than just seeing a still photograph. Because a lot of times it's hard to tell how roughness changes when you're just looking at photography. Uh, so different layers of scratches, making sure that you are, and you're seeing a little bit of that. You're getting dings on the edges, so focusing on edges, seeing like where it's getting worn, like the tops and sides of the housing are going to see a lot more wear than the inside. Where the gun is getting set down or getting, laid down, thrown. Uh, Maybe you're going to see scratches along the edge of the screws where you're making your adjustments or disassembling things. Uh, Maybe the edges of your buttons are getting a little chewed up because this is a softer rubber. So maybe you could go in. Sometimes I take things into ZBrush and just chew a little bit out on the like edges of things, especially like softer materials like plastic and rubber. and that bakes really nicely down, um, especially if you're also going in and modifying your low poly. Uh, Scratches, yeah, edge scratches, surface scratches. You want to get different types of scratches. So in like Substance Painter, there's different um, scratch generators. Use a mix. Go in there and like hand paint some. You always want to get a variety and not stick to like one thing. Also, think about the scale of your object and the scale of scratches. Something I've talked about before is I like calipers. Calipers are a measuring tool. They can get really fine. And I've actually used calipers to measure the width of scratches on an object and length and get that ballpark. So I know that I'm not just eyeballing it. I know about how big a scratch should be on something of a right size. Uh, so you can either look at good reference or go out and do some real measurement stuff. And, if you don't have an EOTech at home, I don't, just look at an object of similar size, especially one that's been beat up. And if you don't have one that's beat up, maybe make something that's been beat up. Take it outside, kick it around, take some sandpaper to it, throw it in some rocks. There's nothing better than having some real reference in your hand. Okay, scratches. Uh, roughness variation. A lot of times I will just take a grunge map, put it in a layer, and put that on roughness, both in adding to roughness and subtracting from it. Because real world objects, they get a lot of oil buildup, especially like when you're handling them with your hands to get, just stuff, they get water, moisture, oil from your skin and the environment. You could add fingerprints, you could add smudges where, it's being handled by hands. Uh, a lot of times I will also add a mask and or add a layer and mask it by edges, so like the edges just get smoother and get shinier where you're handling them, where they're being rubbed or you're being handled by your fingers. Uh, and just that roughness breakup is going to, like, really right now it's very monolithic looking, very single note, and just having a lot of roughness breakup is good. Uh, Good reference for this is like going and looking at kitchen knives. Kitchen knives are very flat and uniform, but if you really take a look at it, you can see how much little imperfections and like surface breakup, surface differences there are in it when it comes to different roughnesses. Um, let's see what else. You could uh, just add more story bits to this. You could add, I've seen optics with armory numbers drawn on them. Like you've probably seen just like blue numbers. Let's see. It's not something you have to do, but just think of different ways to tell a story. Actually, like this is a really good reference overall of just like adding stuff to it. Like there's lots of different like scratches on the aluminum. One thing to keep in mind is like, what is this surface? Is this a treated metal? Is this a painted metal? Um, I'm gonna guess this outer shell is a painted metal. And just knowing how different things react when they're worn, depending on how they're treated. Um, this has got some, cable, what is that, paracord wrapped around it. Um, little things that tell stories. Which this is all depends on like what you're going for, but when it comes to a portfolio piece, being able to add more things, tell more stories, show more of your skill is always going to help you stand out, help you do better for those interview processes than just doing the base object. Um, what else? Uh, you could do, mm, I don't know, yeah, thinking it's kind of a blurry compressed photo, but you could also see like there's lots of sand and everything going on, lots of wear. Uh, that electrical tape there. See, like, yeah, things like that. Electrical tape, cord, they definitely show a range of skill when it comes to modeling, baking, texturing, uh, differences. And yeah, it's something to consider. Uh, okay, this has kind of gone off the rails of more than just texturing. What I would say if this was a if you were handing this to me and I was your team lead or supervisor, I would say that this is um, a starting point, and I don't know like how far along you are, but this is a starting point. This is what I would consider like base materials and not something that's uh, final, because I would want to see a lot more character to it. In general, most of the places I've worked, we look for a lot more wear and tear on things in general, um, to kind of sell the fact that things have been used. Most things aren't brand new, unless you're doing marketing. Um, Now I'm just talking in circles. So I'll wrap this up here. If you have any questions, just ping me. And hopefully this has been helpful.